walk in, everybody's playing with their phones.
They're getting
Technology, isn't it a wonderful thing?
It is. You might just need one more minute on to your right there, Sheriff.
One more minute?
One more minute.
Okay. Not a problem.
Not from everybody.
Problems? Y'all are having connection problems too over there?
Yep.
You guys, it's.
Right?
All right, bye.
We're good, thank you.
Sheriff, what can you tell us about this case?
Well, on Sunday evening, just before midnight, Lieutenant Sean Gordon of the Clay County Sheriff's Office was traveling north on County Road 215 as it approached Blanding Boulevard. We believe that at that time he encountered the suspect. What I'd like to do before we go into any other details is I'd like to kind of go over a little bit about the process for y'all to be able to explain to the public. You need to understand it yourself, and I think it's very important that we do that. This is the first police-involved shooting for the Clay County Sheriff's Office in 4 years. The last one was in 2012. And by policy and practice, we always ask an outside agency to conduct our investigations of police-involved shootings for the purpose of showing transparency that we're not going to investigate our own. We've asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to be the primary investigating agency on this case, and as I get into the facts of the matter, you'll hear me refer you to them because it is their investigation that's currently ongoing. Once the Florida Department of Law Enforcement completes their investigation, which will include talking to the lieutenant, then we will conduct an internal investigation as well with our use of force board to determine if any policies or procedures were violated during the course of this incident. During that time, we will interview Lieutenant Gordon, but not until then. Law enforcement officers are covered by the Garrity decision, which gives them certain rights during a police investigation of an officer-involved shooting. We are required by law to follow those guidelines, which allows the officer to delay making a statement until they've had an opportunity to confer with counsel. So what I'm telling you today is not as a result of an interview with Lieutenant Gordon, because that interview has not occurred yet, and the first interview with him will be with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I'm telling you what I believe happened based on what we know, what independent investigation of the scene that night could show, physical evidence, things like that, radio transmissions, and so forth. But I thought it was important to explain the process so you'll understand we're not trying to cover anything up. It's just we have rules and policies that we have to follow, and this is the case in any law enforcement agency doing an officer-involved shooting. So as I said, just before midnight, the lieutenant encountered this vehicle that, based on the driving of the suspect vehicle, we believe the lieutenant initiated a traffic stop that ended up in a yard at the intersection of Primrose and Alligator Boulevard in Middleburg, Florida. The radio transmission with the deputy at the time indicated that he made a stop, gave a tag number and a location. We believe that at that time Lieutenant Gordon approached the vehicle, obviously retrieved a driver's license from the suspect. We know that the lieutenant came back to his vehicle and radioed in to check and see if there were any warrants or outstanding tickets or anything like that on the driver. At some point, Lieutenant Gordon got back out of his vehicle and approached the suspect vehicle, which at that time apparently was put into reverse and began to back up at a high rate of speed. And you can see that the vehicle was making, the steering wheel was turned to the right, making the vehicle turn into Lieutenant Gordon, who was immediately trapped by a fence that was on the side of the car. Lieutenant Gordon, we believe, at that point was forced to jump up on the threshold or the running board if you will, of the truck, which was accelerating backwards towards his patrol car. At that time, we believe Lieutenant Gordon discharged his service weapon a number of times while the suspect was still behind the wheel driving the vehicle. It collided with the patrol car, pushing the patrol car backwards, as you can see in the photographs that have been provided, and came to a resting spot in the middle of the road. You can see that the tires have been in both directions spinning, causing the vehicle to sink down into the soft sand in the road there. At that point, we know that a citizen came out. I believe it may have been an off-duty Jacksonville officer, and assisted Lieutenant Gordon in taking the suspect into custody. He was then transported to the hospital, where he has received treatment and is in, I believe, critical condition, but stable condition at the hospital. This was Lieutenant Gordon's first shooting. He's been a law enforcement officer with the Sheriff's Office for 18 years. He has no prior disciplinary record, no internal investigations, has undergone a tremendous amount of training, just graduated from the Commander's Academy that the Florida Sheriff's Association puts on. He is an outstanding officer and has no prior history. The history of the suspect, I think you've been given a copy of that, has an extensive criminal record. You've got copies of that to review. I believe that we are very fortunate at this point that we're not planning a funeral for a deputy that could have been killed in this incident. And I think it reinforces the fact that the public needs to know that in order to avoid being shot by a police officer, simply comply with that officer's orders. If that had happened in this case, we believe that, that no shooting would have occurred. So with that, I'll answer any of your questions.
Did he appear, or did we determine if he was intoxicated or under the influence of any
Now that I don't know. I will have to refer you to the FDLE for their investigation. There will be two separate investigations. The first is FDLE's investigating of our shooting, and then after that there will be a criminal investigation of the conduct of the driver. And that will be conducted at the conclusion of FDLE's investigation. So I can't really talk about any evidence that was found in the vehicle, any evidence of criminal conduct on the part of the suspect, because that will be a part of an active criminal investigation afterwards.
I know you have to do an investigation, but at first glance, does it appear Officer or Lieutenant Gordon did anything improper?
Well, I've been doing this for 42 years, and I can tell you that it looks like Lieutenant Gordon was put in a situation where he was in fear of his life and had to use deadly force. So I would say, in answer to your question, I don't see anything, but that will be borne out by a criminal or by a investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement throughout their investigation.
Could you go over the events again? He radioed in after getting the license and was walking back towards him, and then the truck.
Well, I believe that he was, after he radioed in the suspect's information, there was something that drew him back out of the car, back to that vehicle. It could have been actions by the driver, either attempting to get out of the vehicle or get ready to put it in reverse and back up. Until we're able to interview Lieutenant Gordon, we won't know for certain. I'm just telling you what it looks like occurred from the physical evidence and what we know from radio traffic and witnesses that have come forward that I've seen on your television stations being interviewed about what happened that night. So that's the chronology of events as we know them right now.
He's on administrative leave, is that right?
Pardon me?
Is he on administrative leave? Is that what's his status?
Normally, per policy, for 3 days after a shooting, an officer is placed on administrative leave. He would not be scheduled to return to work until sometime next week.
Will he be allowed to return to work even under this investigation?
Yes, I have no reason to say he would not.
So, so Clay County Sheriff's Department is basically assisting FDLE with this investigation, and then once FDLE has done their investigation, then you guys will do your own?
No, actually, we're not assisting them. They do that on their own. There's no, it's a bifurcated process where FDLE comes in and independently investigates the shooting. They make a ruling in conjunction with the state attorney's office on the legality of that. And then after they're through, then we conduct an internal, because we have certain policies, rules of engagement that we want to make sure are followed. And then after all that, we'll conduct a criminal investigation involving the suspect. In this particular case, we expect he'll survive. In a case where a suspect maybe is killed, then that part of the process would never have to occur.
Any idea how long these processes take? Is this going to be weeks, months?
FDLE is being, I think, inundated right now around the state with police shootings, because many agencies are now utilizing them as an outside entity. So I wouldn't expect that it will be something that would be done very quickly. I would look for probably 4 or 5 weeks at a very minimum, maybe even longer, before they're through with their process.
Does that put you in a bind managing an officer a deputy who's going to come back to work knowing he's got this hanging over his shoulders? How do you deal with that?
Well, you know, it does, because you know, we don't have an official finding of fact yet by an outside agency, but I think that it still is better than trying to investigate yourself. I would rather have an outside agency do that and take a little longer than for us to try to investigate ourselves and have someone accuse us of not doing a proper, thorough investigation.
And will his duties remain the same? He's out on the streets like normal, or do you have to adjust his work?
No, he's out on the street as normal when he comes back.
Sheriff, you know, luckily for your agency, I know you guys haven't had an officer-involved shooting in a while. In the investigative process, you know, do you think having dash cameras or body cameras may have helped in maybe speeding up the process or trying to get a better understanding of what happened?
Well, I know that a lot of people believe that if you wear a body camera, that it's going to be the panacea or the silver bullet for answering these things. But I will tell you this, I have never seen a body-worn camera that can accurately depict what the 5 senses of a human being has when they're in a situation like that. And I think in many cases, body-worn cameras cause more questions than they give answers. Undeniably, there are cases where it will clearly show. But I believe for every case that it clearly shows, there are going to be cases that there are going to be more questions than answers as a result. I've looked at a lot of body-worn camera footage. It's usually real jumpy. It's you know, very difficult to see anything. This was a dark area out here. It's, you know, questionable that a body-worn camera would have really shown anything. I'm not a big believer in body-worn cameras.
And dash cameras?
Dash cameras are the same thing. They're one-dimensional. It shows one thing. Where, you know, an officer has peripheral vision, they have the sense of smell and touch and hearing and all the things that you know, a body camera just doesn't show. So I don't think that body cameras are. If I have millions of dollars to spend, I'm going to hire more deputies and train them properly. That's just my opinion on body cameras.
I'm sorry, you did have a dash camera or no dash
No,
camera?
we don't have dash cameras.
Do you plan on it?
The only vehicle that has a dash camera in the sheriff's office is one of our DUI cars. We don't have any cameras.
Do we know the initial stop, what led to that?
Well, until we talk to Lieutenant Gordon, we really won't know for sure. Obviously, he had a valid reason for stopping it, I'm sure. And apparently, based on some of the things we found at the scene that I can't discuss, there'll be a criminal investigation that will occur at the conclusion of this shooting investigation.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, Sheriff, based on these pictures, so he jumped on the sideboard, which is the kind of the bright portion of the
Well,
picture?
I call that a threshold or a running board. It's where the door closes.
That's where he jumped up
We
to?
believe that he got up on that to possibly avoid being run over, because the door, as you see, is bent back against the patrol car. He would have been between the patrol car and the truck door as the truck is accelerating backwards. So in order to avoid being crushed, the only place he could go would be up on that.
Were they kind of perpendicular to each other? And
The patrol car was at an angle behind the truck, and the truck backed up and hit the patrol car, spinning it back. That's why it's perpendicular in this photo. The patrol car was pushed backwards by the impact of the truck. and the deputy would have been in between the two of them had he not jumped out of the way, jumped up on the side of the truck to keep from getting crushed. It was a very, very dangerous situation.
Can you talk a little bit about that area of Clay County, Alligator Boulevard? I mean, you guys have had history there with David White. I mean, is that a problem area for you guys?
Well, you know, it does have a sense of foreboding for the fact that the first deputy killed in 100 years in an adversarial action in Clay County was killed a very close distance to this. I think it's probably more happenstance than anything that it just happened, that was the direction that this car turned. So other than symbolic, really probably not.
I mean, you said earlier it's a dark area out there. I mean, is it rural? Is it? I mean, just is that a problem area for you guys out there in that region?
Well, you know, I wouldn't say any more than anywhere else. You know, it's not. I don't want to say that Alligator Boulevard is a bad area of Clay County. It's really no worse than many other rural areas that we have. It's just a rural area. Not many street lights. Not a lot of people.
Anything else?
You said based on what was seen at the scene, there may be a criminal investigation. Will that take place concurrent with these other investigations going
No.
on, or will we have
We'll
to wait till everything
wait.
else is done?
We'll wait until FDLE completes their investigation. They won't be investigating the suspect. We will. They're investigating the officer's actions.
Okay.
Once that's concluded, then we'll be able to investigate the crime that we believe may have occurred at this scene.
But that won't happen until the investigation of the officers.
That's right.
So what
That's
would happen to him if this investigation goes on for a while? He's released from the hospital, then he can go about his way, I guess, until you...
Talking about the
The
suspect?
suspect, yeah,
suspect.
until
Yeah, well-
you're able to do your criminal investigation.
It's really hard to say at this point right now. That would just be speculation.
I mean, let's say you said you've only had how many officer-involved shootings in the past?
There were 3 in 2012, including the David White case. We haven't had one since then. It's been 4 years since we've had a police-involved shooting in Clay County.
I mean, and what do you think that's because? Training? I mean,
Well, I think that it is because of training. If you look at our use of force reports, and I think Mary can probably provide those to you, there are many, many times when officers would legally be justified in using deadly force, but they've used other means to subdue suspects. Officers use deadly force as an absolute last resort. We don't go right to deadly force at the first chance. They use other means, less lethal means, to take people into custody. And I think it demonstrates the restraint and the training that's used by officers here. But I want to overemphasize the fact that I don't want deputies being constrained from using it when it's appropriate and putting themselves or other people in harm's way. And I got to tell you that I believe in many instances the hype that comes from the press over the use of deadly force is a chilling effect on officers out there who may restrain themselves and end up getting themselves or somebody else hurt. So I like to let the officers know that we stand behind them when they have to make these decisions, because they are very tough decisions that are split second, and people in hindsight take weeks and months and years to dissect them. But they have 1 second to decide whether they're going to live or die. And I think our deputies in Clay County have used tremendous restraint and are very professional and very proud of the way they go about doing their duties out there every day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sheriff. Would you mind if I held on to your notes?
I did not know that.
Since I wasn't recording you, I just like to have it.
Very good.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Mayor.